Hey guys, it's Bree here with Blossom and Branch, and today I'm going to be going through my seed organization and ordering seeds for next year, clearing out my seeds from previous years, and just talking about how I organize my seed starting. Let's go. Seed starting organization and planning for the garden season is one of the more intimidating parts of gardening, and this is because there are so many different kinds of plants and seeds we can start. There are so many different start dates and different needs for each seed. Do they need light? Do they need darkness? Do they need to be buried? What kind of growing environment? How long do they take? Are they frost tolerant? I used to be really intimidated by all of this too, and I totally understand how you might be. So today I thought it might help to show you how I organize, and I do this early. So usually my cue to start organizing all of my seeds is Christmas. I like to take the time between the Christmas holiday and New Year's when it's kind of that weird in-between time. You might be off of work, but holidays have passed, there's maybe not a ton to do. It's a great time to start going through your seeds and planning your garden for next season. If you're looking to grow more cut flowers, we do have a few other videos where we show some cut flower garden plans, so you might want to go check those out if you're looking to grow some more flowers, but you're not sure where to start. What I want to start with is my seed storage. Now you may have seen this before. A lot of gardeners organize their seeds this way. This is just a photo storage container that I got at Michael's, which is a craft store. You can probably get them at Hobby Lobby. I have used this same one for the last 5 years, so they are very strong. This is very sturdy plastic, and while I don't always like to use plastic, sometimes there's not a better alternative. I've experimented with using mason jars, but the shape isn't quite right for storing seeds, so I'm sticking with my photo storage cases. Now, people organize these in all kinds of different ways. I'm going to show you how I organize mine. Now, I typically store this in my walk-in cooler. You probably don't have a walk-in cooler, but the reason I store it in there is because it's cold and it's fairly humidity controlled. Ideally, you're keeping your seeds in a cold space. So having them somewhere outside like a garden shed is not ideal because the more heat they're exposed to, the less long they're going to be viable. The cooler and drier you can keep them, the longer they'll likely be viable for. So I like to keep them in a cold place. If you have an extra fridge or even a freezer, you can keep these in there as well. So I like to sort them by two different categories. One is whether I'm going to be transplanting them or direct sowing them. So you can see here on one side I write transplant. That means that these are seeds that I'm going to have to start indoors and then transplant as seedlings into the ground. Versus I have other ones that are labeled direct sow. That means I'm going to be putting those ones directly into the ground. Those are things like pumpkins, cucumbers, zinnias, things that really don't actually like to be started inside. Sunflowers is another example. Those ones I label direct sow. I go a step further and I organize by how many weeks I'm going to be starting ahead of my last frost. And this is going to be important once we start tying into our calendar. You can see here I put January or December. I just know that that's about 5 months before my last frost date. And these are ones that I need to start really early. Things like Lysianthus. Lysianthus, I usually start in early January or late December, and they don't bloom for me until July. And then I go down 12 to 14 weeks before last frost, 8 weeks before last frost. So I can just pull out at any time any of these containers of seeds and know that I need to start all of these ones at 8 weeks before last frost. I do the same thing with my direct sow. Some of these I can direct sow before last frost. So for example, these ones are labeled direct sow 8 weeks before last frost. So I would be starting these directly in the ground at the same time that I'm starting these ones inside. So I can grab all of those for the week at 8 weeks before last frost and know exactly what I need to plant. Now let's sync this storage container with the next step. So that's how I store my seeds, but how do I know which seed goes into which container, when to start them? That's a whole nother piece of this puzzle. So let me show you what I do for that. This is my magical binder. You wouldn't know it because it's pretty inconspicuous looking and boring, but this binder is my game changer in the garden. This is what keeps me organized. It helps me so much when I'm in the garden, when I'm seed starting. So during the seed starting season, I keep this in my seed starting space. And then actually once it's time to garden, I usually keep it somewhere very accessible, like my mudroom or somewhere that I go in and out from the garden every day so that I can remember to take notes. Let me show you the inside. I keep a lot of things in here. I have previous plant orders and receipts and catalogs and things on this side. That's not really important. What's important is this side. So here I have put in a bunch of laminate sheets. I have extras that don't have anything in them yet. When I figure out which plants I want to grow for that season, I go usually to Johnny's, which is Johnny's Seeds, and they have great information on their website about growing each of these plants. And they're actually one of the more reliable ones that I found online in terms of giving good information on when to start seeds, different growing aspects, soil preferences, light preferences, both for seed starting and germination and also for growing on. So what I do is, this is actually printed directly from the Johnny's website, and this is for sweet peas. Sweet pea growing information. And you can see on here, I've printed out the Latin name, how many days to maturity, so I know when these sweet peas are going to bloom, whether they're annual or perennial. You'll learn all of this as you garden more, but in the beginning it can be helpful just to know. It'll tell me how many days to germination, so I know since I've started my seeds, 14 to 21 days is average for sweet pea germination, so I know if at 2 weeks I haven't seen germination, not to panic, because that is average for sweet peas versus some other seeds start much faster. This way I know, okay, I just need to wait and be patient a little bit longer. I don't have to rush out and buy more seed. It also gives me important information like sowing. This one is recommended to be direct seeded. Now in my zone, I know that that doesn't work, and I know that based on the notes that I've written down from previous years. It also gives instructions if I'm starting inside at seed depth. It will tell me that darkness is needed for germinating. This is really important with seeds. If you try to germinate a seed that needs darkness in light, it's not going to germinate for you. This happens with sweet peas a lot. It also happens with a couple others like violas. Pansies need darkness to germinate as well. This is all really nice information, again, to have printed out and in this little binder, so that as I'm starting my seeds, I can just flip right to this page and say, okay, here's exactly what I need to start this seed. Now, as soon as I've got those seeds planted out, it also gives me additional information like that it needs full sun, that you should trellis them, what spacing you should use, and I'll even put in things like vase life, because those are one of the things that I like to take notes on. And again, I can have all of this in one page. So you can see up here, some of the other things that I write down on these binder pages are different seeds that I've used and whether they germinated well. So here I wrote that I had good germination from Florette, a so-so germination from Johnny's this year, which was unusual. Don't soak or nick, so I did an experiment on scarification, whether nicking or soaking the seeds had any effect on germination, and it didn't, so I wrote that down so that I don't bother doing that in the next year. And I also write down what dates I started, what dates they germinated, temperatures, so I have noted that these grew and were just fine down to 25 degrees, and that they didn't need any additional cover. And then I also will put when I planted them out. So I planted these ones out March 11th under a cover, and I covered them if it got below 20 degrees. And that was a great sweet pea year. But would I remember all of those dates for all of the different varieties and things that I grow if I didn't write it down? No. So the nice thing about having this binder is year to year, you can write out different things, what works, what doesn't work, and then you can come back and reference it really easily. So this binder, of all the things that I do, it took me a while to pull it together, but it was so very worth it. Now, the last piece of this little puzzle that I have here with my seed starting that really helps me stay organized going into spring is a basic calendar. Now, I know we all have a calendar on our phones now. Who needs a real paper calendar? I do. And that's because I don't always want to be either fiddling with my phone or picking up my phone, because my hands are usually dirty from soil blocking. I don't want to get my phone all dirty and muddy any more than it already is. So having a calendar is helpful. And again, coming back and being able to quickly reference a calendar is really nice. Now, unfortunately, my calendar that I've kept for the last 4 years is actually in our storage container right now, so I can't get to it. So I'm going to show you on a new calendar. Now, normally I just use one calendar, and even though it's not up to date on the year, I just keep coming back so that I can reference about which dates I start seeds. So here's how I start my calendar. Now again, I just use the same calendar every year, even if it's not 2024, I'll keep using this one for the next 4 years, because I can come in and I can write in different years which date I started my seeds, and then I can come back and say, okay, this worked or this didn't work, and I can adjust it for the next year. I can also put that stuff in my binder, but it can be nice to But it can also be nice to have this calendar to cross-reference it and to be able to look at it quickly. I always start on my last frost date. That is the first date that I write down in my calendar. Here I have May. So in my zone, I'm zone 5-6. I guess that the new USDA zones were officially zone 6. And I know that my average last frost date is around May 15th. So I start there and I'll label this last frost. From here, I will count back because various seeds are started various times before last frost or direct sown at last frost, before last frost, etc. So it can be helpful for me to know what those dates are. So I'll usually start by counting back 2 weeks before last frost, okay? So here that would be 1, 2. So May 1st is 2 weeks, and then I just use the abbreviation BLF, before last frost. That way I know that once I start going through my seeds, I can pick out all those things that need to be started 2 weeks before last frost, and I can jot them down in my calendar. I'll go back again 4 weeks before last frost. So here we have the 17th of April would be 4 weeks before last frost. And then I'll go back 6 weeks before last frost, and then I'll go back 8 weeks before last frost. Let's do 10 weeks too, because this is when I start my peppers, 10 weeks before last frost. It's helpful to keep an eye on that on your calendar because these dates creep up on you. So especially when you have a lot of things going on in the spring, you're trying to get your soil prepped, you're trying to get your garden ready for planting, and these dates can creep up on you. All of a sudden, you can realize that you missed your 8 weeks before last frost and now you're behind. And if I'm not looking, if I don't have this calendar handy, I might miss that March 6th is my pepper starting date and then I get behind. So I do this all in January before I have to start starting seeds because it helps me so much in my head to have all these things organized. So I'll put under 10 weeks before last frost, then I want to start my peppers. Now this is kind of a small calendar. The annual calendar that I was mentioning that I keep year over year is bigger so that I can write more things in each one. But I know that here 10 weeks before last frost, I about want to start my peppers. Maybe here at 6 weeks before last frost, I want to start my tomatoes. You don't have to do this, but I do find that the calendar is helpful for me just in glancing at it and knowing, okay, this is my 8 week before last frost. Now I'm gonna come in and grab my 8 week before last frost seed packet and I'm gonna start all these things. So it seems really basic. You could of course put those in your phone calendar, but for me, having something that I can look at is just very helpful. So that's kind of how I organize my brain here in the off season, going into garden season, and organize my seeds, figure out what I have, and that's what I'm gonna do next, is I'm going to go through my seed container and I'm going to pick out what I'm going to keep, what I'm going to get rid of and start fresh with. Now I have 2 stacks. I have a stack of empty or expired seed packets or ones that I'm not gonna grow again that I can either donate to a seed library or a school, or I might even chaos garden with them and just throw them out anywhere I have bare soil and see what happens. And then I also have a stack of ones that I'm going to germination test. Tune in our next video. I'm going to show you exactly how we do this process and see if any of our seeds from last year are still viable so that we can save money and not buy more. All right, I hope that seeing our process was helpful for you in some way. I hope that maybe it helps demystify the process of ordering on, especially when you're growing a lot of things from seed. It can get really confusing really quickly. So hopefully this calendar and box and binder situation is helpful for you. Yeah, and let me know how you organize your seeds in the comment. I'd love to hear about it. And we'll see you guys around here next time at the farm.